Hi there. Today I'm looking at one of the most magnificent cinemas ever built in the UK. I'll attempt in some small way to do justice to and pay homage to the Paramount in Newcastle upon Tyne, later to become the Odeon. The theatre's design and construction was magnificent in its opulence, with no expense spared. The construction. Well, this was one of 7 Paramount theatres built in UK cities in the 1930s. Others were in Manchester, Leeds, Liverpool, Glasgow and Birmingham, as well as Tottenham Court Road in London's West End. But Newcastle was considered to be the most valuable site outside the West End location. It had a brick facade with stone dressings. At street level, an American-style canopy extended the full width of the front elevation. The cinema bore a strong similarity to the Paramount Theatre at Aurora, Illinois. Charles M. Fox is believed to have been the interior designer of both. A special studio was established in the theatre by the decorators W. Turner Lord & Co. of London, as it was necessary to make full-size drawings of all the various details which occur in the ceilings. The building cost approximately £250,000 and was designed by Frank Thomas Verity in association with his partner S. Beverley. Opulent in the extreme, the decor included pilasters which flower into the glass illumination fittings, silk panels, over 500 motifs and paintings applied directly to the walls over a 2-month period, sequin-spangled drapery and a series of statues. The building had to be measured inch by inch, this being necessary in view of the variation in certain parts of the buildings. In some cases, the designs had to be repeated in the full size many times. The main motif of the decoration scheme centres around 16 large terracotta silk panels, some of which were 35 feet high, with figures and foliage painted thereon. The construction of these panels was carried out in the London studios of the company, and when finished were transported to Newcastle and fixed in position on the auditorium walls. The huge electric illuminated sign at the front of the house measured 50 feet in height. It was one of the largest vertical signs of its kind in England and was studded with 5,000 lights. The number of lights employed throughout the building totalled 12,000, just in case you're wondering. Seating was provided for 2,604, made up of 1,374 in the stalls and 1,230 in the Royal Circle, Grand Circle and the balcony. The proscenium was 54 feet wide and there was a 30-foot deep stage and a large orchestra pit. There was a Wurlitzer 4-manual 20 ranks theatre organ fitted, the console of which rose on a power-operated lift, stage right, and the orchestra pit also had a lift which could be operated independently of the organ. This Wurlitzer was by far the largest instrument in the north, and its general specification follows on the lines of the Manchester Paramount instrument. It was a particularly big model built to standard Wurlitzer specifications. The organ weighed 15 tons and occupied 70 tons of shipping space, and its blowing equipment called for a 15 horsepower motor. The organ chambers set right and left of the stage. In the projection suite, a Western Electric sound system was installed. There were 2 follow spots, a slide lantern and a colour effects lantern. Viewers may be able to identify the projectors precisely. I just think they're K-Lee, with peerless magnarchs of course. The whole of the projection room was surrounded by 14-inch thick walls, with portholes of fire-resistant glass. If an explosion had occurred, the roof would have blown off before the fire reached the auditorium. The fire curtain or safety curtain covering the proscenium opening weighed several tons. It was covered on the front with thick asbestos cloth and the back with steel plates. It could be lowered either from the stage or from outside the theatre automatically. The theatre could be emptied of patrons comfortably within 2 minutes. The hanging light fittings in the foyer were coated in 9-carat gold to avoid the metal turning black in the course of time. The walls of the Circle Lounge were hung with oil paintings from the Paramount Gallery. The walls of the Grand Foyer were decorated with oil paintings by famous artists, to the value of approximately £3,000 at 1930 prices. There was also a 200-seat restaurant for patrons called Bimbi's, situated in the basement of the theatre. A purpose-built multi-storey car park called the Decks was constructed to the rear of the Paramount, with a covered walkway leading to the cinema, complete with chauffeur's room. This was designed to attract the more upmarket patrons. Now, what about the opening? Opening as the Paramount on Monday, September 7, 1931, with a stage show presentation by Francis A. Mangan titled The Ladder of Roses, featuring numerous artists and 24 Tillerettes. Francis Morgan had used the wonderful stage and lighting effects with great artistic skill, and his stage presentations, notably the ballet A Ladder of Roses, were of extraordinary beauty. Mr. Mangan also engaged the 8 Black Streaks, a troupe of step dancers who showed amazing skill in the art in which so many North Country men are indeed experts. The Paramount Symphony Orchestra, under the direction of Anton, the famous conductor and violinist from the Opera House in Milan, the Brussels Conservatoire and the Queen's Hall, London, were magnificent, and the Wurlitzer organ, manipulated so magnificently by Vincent Trippett, was just splendid. The film Monte Carlo, starring Jeanette MacDonald and Jack Buchanan, was also presented. The new cinema was described as one of the best in Europe. The reception given after the performance was attended by the Lord Mayor and Mayoress and about 700 guests. J.C. Graham and Earl St John entrusted the social arrangements to Pat O'Connor and E. Ayres. The house was under the supervision of Leslie C. Holderness, and the general management was in the hands of C. Ronald Young from the Plaza Theatre in London. The complete personnel of the theatre was composed of over 200 people. The house manager was Pat O'Connor from the London Plaza. The theatre opened at 12 o'clock every day. A newspaper report on the opening night declared, "The Paramount was the most beautiful theatre I've ever seen. It was a cathedral of motion pictures. One minute the theatre would be blue, then it was all red and then green." The uniforms. American concepts on presentation were applied to the staff, and high standards were expected. At the start of each day, all front of house staff were paraded in the centre circle, where hands and uniforms would be checked for cleanliness. The whole of the uniform dress worn by attendants was supplied by Alfred Harold Limited of Wardour Street in London. The ladies wore a distinctive dress of trousers and blouse together with berets. The men wore a uniform on the lines of the officers' mess uniform. The colourings of the uniforms and costumes were predominantly French grey and apricot, in keeping with the general colour scheme in the theatre. Each female member of staff wore a large ribbon bow of a gold shade across the front of the blouse. This was exclusive to the Paramount circuit, for which it had been specially designed. The reception ladies, otherwise known as the chocolate girls, walked about with a tray with boxes of chocolates. They wore black and rose-pink costumes on flowing lines. The high collars were rose-coloured, the dresses had rose-coloured cuffs, and there was rose facing at the bottom of the dress. Now the operation of the theatre. Big-name dance bands like Billy Cotton and Joe Loss played the Paramount. There were personal appearances by stars of the day like George Robey, Anna Neagle, Al Bowley and George Formby. November 1939 brought about a change of ownership, and all of Paramount UK theatres were bought by Odeon, and therefore on the 22nd of April 1940 the theatre was renamed Odeon, and the Odeon continued to do a roaring business through the decades that followed. In 1954 the theatre was altered for CinemaScope presentations, with the first film being, you've guessed it, The Robe. This included modernising the auditorium and simplifying the theatre's decorations, although there was still a lot of the original interior left in place at this time. Sadly, the theatre's Wurlitzer organ was removed in the 1960s. During the 60s and 70s, very different music acts appeared there, among them the Rolling Stones, Pink Floyd, Rod Stewart, The Who, Tom Jones, etc. Yep, they all performed at the Odeon. There was a brief period of uncertainty for the Paramount in 1972 when a plan to demolish the theatre and redevelop the site was mooted, but in the end, thankfully, the plans were not carried out. However, in 1975 the auditorium was radically altered when Odeon tripled the theatre. The main screen was created by extending the circle forward to the proscenium, creating a large 1,228-seat cinema. Two more screens with seating for 158 and 250 were added below the circle at the same time, and a fourth was added in 1980 in the theatre's former front stalls and stage area, so ending any hope of the theatre returning to live entertainment. In 1987 the building was refurbished at a cost of £750,000, and in 1999 it was given a Grade 2 listed status by English Heritage, who stated at the time that the theatre was the best surviving Paramount cinema in Britain, with well-composed facade and rich interior with Lalique glass fittings. However, despite the future looking hopeful for the building, the Lister status would not protect it for long. In 2001, Odeon had plans for the building of a new multiplex cinema in the centre of Newcastle, and they applied for and succeeded in having the Paramount's listed status removed so that they could demolish it and sell off the site for redevelopment. The theatre was closed on the 26th of November 2002 after the last showing of the films Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets 28 days later and Die Another Day. The company's new Odeon would open 2 days later. After the closure of the cinema, Odeon quickly removed all of its corporate branding from the building, and by the following morning all trace of it was gone. At the time of the Odeon's closure, a decision to remove listed status from the building was widely criticised. Retired architect and cinema building expert Edward Dietz of Gateshead said, "I am appalled at this decision. It looks like somebody wants to get rid of it. When it comes to cinemas and foyers, it is one of the best I have ever come across. I don't think there is anything else like it left." For the next decade and a half, the Pilgrim Street building would lie decaying and deserted, a sad, empty shell of its former self, as its future lay shrouded in uncertainty. Then in October 2016, despite the concerted efforts of heritage groups such as the Northumberland and Newcastle Society to preserve the building, it was announced it would be demolished to make way for a new retail and leisure complex. In 2017, the former Odeon, the once magnificent Paramount, to the despair of many, was bulldozed into history. The theatre's demolition didn't go quite to plan, however, as on the 3rd of April 2017, in the late evening at 11 p.m, the theatre's entire facade collapsed onto the street below. Amazingly, there were no injuries or fatalities, and it was lucky that the collapse had happened at such a late hour, because many people may have been killed or injured if it had happened in the daytime. The chaotic mass of debris was soon removed, however, and demolition of the building proceeded into the following month, and before long there was no sign that the wonderful 1930s Paramount Theatre ever existed. It was said to be haunted, and while clearing rubble from the demolished building, there were reports of a ghostly figure seen wandering round the site. For 4 years, the Stack, a temporary food, drink and shopping hub, made up of shipping containers, traded on the former Odeon site and proved fairly popular. That itself was replaced by a major office block housing 9,000 HMRC staff, Her Majesty's Revenue and Customs. Notwithstanding the loss of the Odeon building with its former Art Deco flourishes and rich history can be counted as another cultural and architectural blow for Newcastle. Following the films on the final night, staff past and present would later attend a party there when they were able to say a private farewell to the building. As the final closing credits rolled on November 27, 2002, long-serving staff members could not hide their sadness. "We will all have happy memories of this place," said Odeon shop worker Miriam Miller from South Shields. "It's sad," agreed staff supervisor Anne Curry from the West End of Newcastle, who had put in more than 28 years' service. "The people who work here are like part of your family. We have always looked after each other. There are high standards that we have all tried to maintain." Peter Talbot had managed the cinema since 1976. He told the local paper at the time of closure, "The Odeon has always been the cinema in Newcastle, with a certain glamour attached to it. It was the place where the stars came for premieres." Mr. Talbot was retiring after 40 years in the business, but the 30 remaining full and part-time staff at the cinema were transferring to the new 12-screen Odeon multiplex at the Gate Leisure Centre. That cinema, over time, would change its name to the Empire and then later Cineworld, ending the Odeon's long association with Newcastle. Well, that's about it for this one, and I hope you liked it. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel because that helps me a lot. Oh, and share, of course. Till next time, be kind to one another, and I will see you soon. Ta-da.